Mochi.
Okay, let me know when you're ready. Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, time for the grossest part of the class. Going to mix up your JB Weld, the gooey stuff, which has like a gooey, shiny finish, and or your steel stick stuff. And so the steel stick is also called plumber's putty, plumber's epoxy putty, and it will stay on there somewhere that it hardens like steel. This one does in 20 minutes. I've seen, I had some other ones that hardened in about 5 or 6 minutes or 7 minutes, something like that, which is really great. This stuff hardens like steel. And so when you want something to really have a hard outer shell and not move at all, it's good to use. The JB Weld has some bend to it, has some flexibility to it. And it's also a 2-part. And so the JB Weld I'd recommend putting into, for instance, what we used for the brass stock, right? So where's our little dragon head? So you'll see when I want to slide the armature wire, so you see that okay? When you want to slide the armature wire down into the brass stock, it's going to have some flexibility. It goes in there and you can kind of mush the JB Weld into there and slide the rod and it'll fill the empty space and it'll keep it from sliding out or coming loose. I wouldn't try cramming a little bit of the steel stick down in there to have it harden and have it adhere and stick to the brass stock. I've tried it before and they ended up popping out and I discovered the steel stick might be good as a glob to put around the outside, like as a shell to keep it from moving. So plumber's putty for stiffer, stronger applications, and JB Weld for smaller, more flexible kind of adhesive applications. Both of them act as an adhesive. And so for this, we get, I find packaging boxes for cereal and snacks to be really good surfaces to mix on because you're usually readily available. You can upscale from your recycle and slice them up. So I have like a little box of these pre-cut, so I can just grab them and have them to use some sort of coffee stirrers usually work, mix them up, and then you can apply. So this is the surgery part. So if you want to come in for a top down on this guy, I mentioned this character has changed quite a few times. He was a smaller, more smaller framed gnome. This is going to be the actual gnome character. You see the body type. The height is not that much difference, but you can see that the girth on this guy, the thickness and the width is a lot different. So he's got a broader body. And so when we drilled the feet out, you can see when you wind it around, it's going to have some move and some give to it. Okay, same thing over here where I had to attach this pin to go into it's going to be with a chariot. So when I put this pin into the chariot, it's going to be supporting all this bulk, this weight, and he's pretty heavy. And so for that, I'm going to use the steel stick around the thigh region to get this. So see, that's all wiggling everywhere, and this is wiggling. So where I'm not going to put it at is I'm not going to put it at the knee where it would bend or at the ankle where it would bend, right? Because the steel stick is hard like steel, like a rock. And you'll have to, in order to get it to move, nice one. In order to get it to move, you'd have to break or you'd have to crack the steel stick. Now the JB Weld's a lot more forgiving, so I've almost moved over to using this for almost everything, but I still do use the steel stick. So I'm gonna just show you both in case you need to get in there and use both for it. So our little quick speed sculpt for the wires. Again, this guy is probably about the size of a final or midterm character, so he came out a little bit larger just for the demonstration. If you did a character like this for your speed gesturals, I'd have him like about half that size just because his wingspan alone is huge. So you want him maybe the size of my hand, not this big giant bat creature. But you'll see right here, see his hips move around like that and the chest. So this is where the steel stick comes in handy. So you'll see right here with this guy and as well with a standard humanoid biped with 2 legs. Again, the pelvis and the chest. Again, with the arms being put on the back side, not the front. This one was done correctly. This one was done correctly as well. You can see the arms are behind the chest, not into the front where the sternum would be. And at the pelvis, this guy, the wire's so strong, he doesn't need any. This is the thinnest wire though, and this one, the wire would bend and move, but you can really put some killer poses on these guys. If I wanted to add an extra super strong pin on this guy, make him flying, I could add an extra pin here. I could bond the torso to the stick pin here, bind this around and do the lashing, right? Use the thinner wire around it to lash it to the wire, and then add the steel stick on there to make sure that it's gonna hang on. And then I could do this really cool, whatever dynamic pose you wanna do. But before I mount him and do any sort of posing like that, we want this to stop, right? And so you can only lash it so many times and it's not gonna really cooperate with you. So let's go through that process. So we're gonna do the surgery as well as the lashing of the hips to the spine and the shoulders to the spine. So in order to do that, we get a cardboard out, we get our GB weld, and let's see, let's go ahead and use the steel stick for this. So I'm gonna get the steel stick out. Another tool I did not put on the list that I will remember to add on there is some sort of razor knife carpenter's blade. I like these particular types of blades that you can break off the tips and renew the tips on there. Yeah, I sure want to go down, top down over here. Can you see okay from over there? So there's there's a core in the middle of it, and these go bad over a while, so you don't need to get a big giant one. I got a big one for, I'm doing a lot of these right now for class, but you can get a smaller tube for like $7. And peel the end off here, and there you go. See the core? There's an outer and an inner, so it's the two-part epoxy in there. And so once you cut these, oh, there's a razor blade in there. Look at that. Wow, what was I thinking? Surprise, there's a razor blade. Okay, so I'll save my carpenter's knife and I'll just use my hand razor. And, you can see how much was used on this guy. You don't have to put a ton on there. It depends on how much torso. If this guy was going to end up being really huge with the membranes of the wings and however the balance is. So just use your best judgment to start with. You can always add more, I suppose, or you could overdo it, and you could overdo it and chisel or grind it away, sand it away afterwards. So here's what it looks like. So here's the outer layer. I have my gloves on. You don't have to. I'll just say for any of these epoxies and resins that you should use your gloves. I've read that you don't have to, but that seems kind of silly because this stuff's really nasty. It smells awful. Whew. Okay, and if there's any hard chunks, if some of it's hardened, just take them off right away because they will not mix. So I could feel little crispy chunks in here that have maybe hardened over time. So I'm just kind of picking those out. So I'm kind of flattening it out. I'm picking out any hardened chunks that I know I should have chiseled those off. And this is a pretty brand new stick. It's not that old. I haven't had it for too long. But as soon as I'm done cutting that piece off, I want to seal it off. So let me go ahead and get two. I'm going to have one chunk for the chest and another chunk for the pelvis. Oh, there's some stuck to the end there still. Didn't even notice. Okay, cool. I'm gonna put it back in the tube right away. Maybe face down. And, this is my own home studio, so when you do something goofy like this, like put a razor blade inside the top, maybe put a, razor, maybe put a warning sign so you don't slice your finger open on the razor blade. But it's nice to designate a razor blade to this stuff because you don't want to get it on anything else, and it will stick to everything and harden and become a general nuisance in whatever you're working on. So for this one, I'm just testing now that I'm remembering how much of these little hard chunks were difficult for me last time. I'm just kind of picking through and making sure there isn't any unusable chunks. So all these little chunks I'm going to get rid of and throw away. I got a little garbage can handy. Have a garbage can handy when you're working with this stuff because you want to get rid of things right away. Now, as soon as you start mixing it, the clock starts. So as soon as I squish one part to the other, you have that 20-minute window, I think it said on the stick. So I would say it's more like 10 minutes because after 10 minutes, you could feel it heating up. And once it starts heating up, you'll know for sure that it is having a chemical reaction going off. So you can hear it. I stick into my gloves. Okay, and I just do like bring it together. I'll do like a couple twists and really kind of munch. Oh, that smells bad. Mix together and then give it a few squishes. So whatever works for you, just mix it up really good. Make sure it's, you don't see the two different parts, the two different colors. Make sure it's one uniform gray and that you don't see any of the dark. I have seen the most trouble with new artists, with new students with this part. They don't mix it up all the way, or they get the wrong one. There's another one that doesn't harden all the way that's still called water epoxy or plumber's putty. There's different ones that don't do the steel stick and become steel hard. So make sure you get the right one. Make sure you do mix it all the way. I see at least 4 or 5 people per class not mix their plumber's putty all the way. And we have to take an X-Acto blade, take it all apart, scrub it off. And it's part of the learning process. I do it too. We just want to be aware of common mistakes like this. So this is getting hot. I can feel it already. And it's beginning to stick to my gloves. So when you get it into your wire, would you come around? Do down, top down. So when you get it into the wire, you want to take, I think what I found works pretty good is to take 2 different balls of it. Take one from the front and one from the back and just press, get the wire just where you want. So make sure it's not rocking, you know, too far to one side or the other. To put one in the back, put one in the front, and just press nice and firm like that. And squish it all the way so it gets into the lashing of the wire. Make sure your measurements haven't gotten off when it's been laying around, and then pinch a little diamond shape, and then pinch again, and then make sure you're kind of getting it, and then kind of leave it. After that, if the metal is wiggling back and forth inside the epoxy when it's still soft, it's going to make little caverns or little open channels inside that basically weaken how much it's grabbing on there. So taking a bunch of the epoxy and bringing it really thin out to the edges doesn't really do much for you. It's just going to crumble. It's going to get weaker as it gets thinner, and it's not really designed for that. The JB weld you can use for that. And then I go down here to the hips, same thing. Kind of position the hips back and forth where I want them to get 2 balls of this stuff. Yeah, it's really getting hot now. I can feel it. So yeah, your work time on this is like 5 minutes. So that's why I didn't mix up that other chunk yet. So same thing here. Maybe 2 from the back since there's a tail there. And make sure all the wire and everything gets in there. And then 1 big one from the front. And you can grind and you can razor, X-Acto blade this stuff off if it gets, I'm making sure I don't go past the hip joint. If I want the legs to flex out, stop at the joint. Because again, this is to immobilize parts of the skeleton and the body that should not move. So that is your pelvis and your sternum, with exceptions of animals who have rib cages that really flex a lot, like a cat or something like that. We'll talk about that when we do comparative anatomy. And it's already, there it goes. It's stiffening up pretty good already. And now his little aluminum foil diaper has been replaced with a gray epoxy steel stick diaper. Cool, and that's, wow, it's done. Now his arms are swiveling still, so I want to be real careful. I'll give it 1 more good pinch. So it's kind of avoiding a lot of that shifting movement. I kind of squeeze it back in, but that's about it. I'm pretty much done. Once it starts hardening, you don't want to be wiggling it because you'll just make cracks and fissures and you'll just make it weaker. And that is pretty much good to go. So I'll let that set for about 10 minutes. It's good to set it in such a way where there's no pressure that's going to make it move, but that one's so lightweight, it shouldn't be too much trouble. Okay, we had our flying lizard. So for the flying lizard and his little heart-shaped wire mesh, we can use the JB weld, the gooey stuff. I'll find his wings in a moment here. Okay, so let's do the surgery here on the dwarf, Ulick, the Dwarven Barbarian. All right, so this is maybe more, well, I'm doing both legs actually. So I'm gonna do the upper thigh, above the kneecap, the lower shin area, and then same thing here. I'm gonna do a little bit in the, I guess it's not gonna get too much up into his thigh, maybe a little bit. I could cut away more of the monster clay for this, but you know, I'm just kind of jumping in here with the demo to do this. So it hasn't gotten warm yet. This one hasn't. Now the stuff that was on my hands, a lot of times you want to try and conserve gloves. If your gloves are beginning to stick, if you're doing another round of this and you're finding that the stuff is sticking so bad to your gloves, take your gloves off and throw them away and get a fresh pair. Because what's happening is the adhesive on the first pair, or the first setting that you did, is tacky and it's grabbing onto the newer adhesive for the second round that you're doing. And so have 2 or 3 pairs of gloves handy. When that starts happening, you don't want to start fighting with the adhesive and have it sticking to your hand, because it becomes really hard to work when stuff's sticking to your fingers. That's Angelina yawning. You okay, Angelina? Long day of recording. I hope everyone's enjoying learning all these steps. It took me many years to learn this stuff, and I'm happy to share all these steps in one big long sitting. There we go. There's his little heart-shaped flying lizard wings. Now before I do the wings on there, I could take the floral wire and thread through the mesh around the spine and actually kind of do some sewing with the metal. I'm not going to do that, but I would recommend you did kind of sew this into place a little bit, because that'll give it a lot more strength and really stick those wings to the torso. It'll help strengthen the bond with the JB weld. You won't have to worry about the wings falling off. All right, so let's give this a whirl. Some snurgery, and then we'll mix up the JB weld and we'll attach the wings. And then the last part, when we pin a leg into the block, I'll show you that as well. Okay, so the mixing part of the video, super awesome and exciting. Nothing entertaining going on here, other than the fact that it's super stinky. Can you smell it?
I can feel it in my eyeballs.
Yeah, I can feel it in your eyeballs. Yeah, that's epoxy. It is strong. Okay, there it goes. So that's getting about the same color. So again, I give a little twist one direction, twist the other direction, and then I'll even take it, do a quick palm roll, ball, and pancake, and fold it a couple times. Whatevs. Just mix it up good. Squish, squish, squish. There we go. All right. Surgery. You want to be careful. You know, like I said, I should have taken an X-Acto blade and cut away more of the monster clay, so I'm comfortable that I'm not going to get, that I have a comfortable work area. Because you can always just stick the wax back on. But as soon as it starts feeling warm, that's when I know, okay, I got to put it on to get it so it bites. And this is where chew marks help a little bit. So if you have chew marks with your pliers, so you can take your pliers and actually scuff the surface and actually chew on the armature a little bit. But I didn't get time to do that before I got started, so we'll skip that. All right, so I want his knee to be just above right here. So I'm going to press from the back and the front side. So I'm pressing into all this lashing or the wire. If you can get it down into all those cracks and crevices, it's going to make it really, really strong. And there it goes. Now I'm not panicking, but I feel that heat coming. As soon as you feel that heat coming, you got to tell yourself, all right, let's get this on there and done before it starts setting and starts, then you're just making cracks and weakening it more and more the longer you wait. Okay, so that's the upper thigh. And if this was a finished piece, if this is something that was going off to a client or for a customer, or you know, a big team project you're working on, maybe I would just work on one part at a time. Maybe I would just do the thighs first, press them really into all those cracks and crevices nice and strong, and then do the lower calf. But I'm just going to kind of go for it here. So I got 2 halves. There we go. And make sure it is pressed in both sides. It's good to make them even for purposes of weight and for dynamics. If this is a stop motion puppet, it's good that it's not going to be uneven in terms of the weight and the density. And these little guys here do help create like little skeleton pieces, and we'll talk about that when we do more on posable character construction. And we start relating all this to their digital rigs and how these warp together to digital rigs. Okay, that is, time is up. Now, if I want the clay to bite onto this, I can take my razor blade and I can just kind of cut some lines, and that'll give the clay something. If it's smooth, it has a harder time biting on some, grabbing onto something. Oh, that side's hard already. Wow. Yeah. So I would say you got definitely less than 10 minutes to set. It says 20 minutes till, I think that meant 20 minutes till it's like completely done. So this is great. I totally saved this character now, hopefully, and can actually finish the concept for the dwarf. And let's add the wings to our flying lizard. So again, I'm just kind of evening him back out. If you definitely want, I was playing around and posing him earlier, so you want to have him, if you're doing an extension off of your spine for ribs or for wings, tails, things like that, you want to make sure you're in a good standard like T pose or A pose. You want to make sure that it's really where you want it to be. So for this one, the teardrop of the heart, I want it to go down and flow into the tail. And I want to leave space here because the rib cage started below the shoulder, at least on the original. So for that, I think we're pretty much good to go. So I'm gonna use this as my work plate. So for that, 50-50 on these guys. They're super messy. They get everywhere. They drive me nuts, even if I'm incredibly careful. So just keep that in mind. Use I just put each bottle in its own separate Ziploc bag when I'm done, because it is a messy process. It's like the pressure you have this happen with like acrylic paint and watercolor paint tubes. Sometimes the pressure of squeezing, sometimes the foil tubes keeps that pressure. So if you pinch the opposite direction, you'll see in the end there, it'll suck back into the tube to relieve the pressure. So I usually try and do that with all of my tubes. I'll squeeze and then do the opposite size and squeeze again to like open up the chamber to bring. I know you don't want to have air in there, but the pressure and having it ooze everywhere is more annoying. So that's just, maybe it's not even that useful. We'll see. All right. Oh, and I should have put that metal cap back on the steel stick, but it's too late. It's done. So garbage. Okay, and the setting time. So this is the steel, and yeah, this one leaked somewhere. Darn, brand new tube still. Yeah, a lot of pressure on this one. And at the end of it, I'll I'll use my popsicle stick, whatever, but I'll like kind of do a little wipe at the end, and then again squeeze opposite so you can see if it goes back in there, and then maybe use, this is old, it's already set, so it's not gonna hurt anything. And kind of maybe scrape and cap that back on right away so it doesn't go all over the place, and get it back in the bag right away so it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, so here we go. So I'm gonna kind of mix as I go because I'm blanking on the exact minutes for when this thing sets. So I'm gonna take half here and half, or whatever, equal chunks, and mix up. Do a little swirl motion, and it gets a nice medium gray, like dark gray tone. Definitely easy to tell if this one's mixed well enough, so people don't usually mess this part up because the two colors are so obvious, because it creates almost like a matte finish compared to the gloss of the two parts, right? You guys all see that? Okay, it's getting pretty good mix going. It's kind of make sure there isn't any little swirls of pure white or pure black in there. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to start off down the center of the wings first. So I'm just going to go here. Yeah, it's like a little paste. This stuff's pretty nasty too, has a strong smell too. It's just not quite as overpowering as the steel stick, but I think at the end of the day, they're both equally gross. Oh, see, there's a big white swirl in there, so you gotta be really careful not to let that happen. And then see, it went through the mesh. Okay, so I'm gonna put some extra down here at the base. So I definitely don't want it coming off from here. So I'm gonna go ahead and the discovery, right? My first flying lizard. That's not a dragon technically, since I don't think I've ever seen a dragon with the wings made from the rib cage before, like an actual. So trial and error. And when you're posing these wire meshes for whatever use your character is going to be, whether it's for you're going to make a digital version for a video game or film, these wire sculptures are so useful because they really give you the initial movement, the range of motion, you know, how ridiculous the head, chibi size of the head related to the body, the length of the neck, you know, where the armpits are, how far those legs can bend or move without, you know, doing a crazy squish or stretch on there. So you learn a lot by doing these little quick wires for the actual rigging you might do for any application, for the digital as well as for a stop motion puppet or just a well posed concept or maquette you might be sculpting. Oh, I got it on my mat. Be careful, keep it over the working surface. So slide my, this stuff comes off from the healing mat pretty well. So now I want to go back over the spine and just kind of crisscrossing one direction then the other. I want to get it in all the threads basically. And if you don't get it all the way in the beginning, you can add more. I wait till it hardens all the way. And so we'll see how that goes. I might need more. Let's see. I'm going to get this down at least a little bit into the tail region. Yeah. Doesn't seem to want to go. There it goes. And at the top of the spine. There we go. Okay, and now I'm gonna get it all over my fingers, so I'm kind of ready at this phase to press all that goo, all that gooey goodness in there. And yeah, this needs more. I'm gonna put more on both the front and the back. Oh, if I want a spine to bend, I should leave open gaps for bending. So I don't think this is gonna bend a lot. I made an error. Typically between the rib cage and the tailbone, that's where your spine bends the most. And maybe I should have left that open so that I can flex and bend it back and forth. So we'll see how that goes. So about 50% more, or maybe about the same amount I just had going. Almost done, Angelina. It's like a little pinhole opening on there is why it come out. There it goes. It's funny, we were watching a movie yesterday and we just saw JB Weld commercial on TV. I was like, what the heck? I was shocked. You can use it for all kinds of stuff. It's almost like a auto body Bondo, like people, like you can use Bondo if anyone has a relative. Got a cousin or aunt or uncle that does body work for cars. Bondo works great for this stuff. And they usually have giant jars of it and you just need a tiny bit, so you can use Bondo. And Bondo actually smells way better than this stuff does. Okay, so give this a quick mix. Go to the other side where I can hold this firm and give it a really quick swirl. And I'm going fast now. You kind of want to rush it, but not rush it, right? So rush it so that we get it on there before it starts setting too much on the rest of it, and scraping off so that that pure white underneath. Scrape up and wipe. Can't believe I'm doing a demo on mixing JB Weld. This is funny. Okay, here we go with a big pasty. And ooh, at least I'm gonna smear it on like crazy down here on the pelvis. There we go. And then do another big chunk of it up here where I know the rib cage is connecting. And then maybe if I need to snap it free in between there, it's not going to be too crazy difficult to flex the wire mesh. Now you'll notice the difference between the quick one we did with the bat and this one that took longer when we did the lizard, because I didn't have to put anything directly on the torso or the pelvis because it's so strong, because we made it all out of one piece. You guys remember how we did that? Way stronger. Okay, lay it down on its back on the other side. Let's go ahead and use this stuff up while we're at it, and let's paste a little big chunk of it right there. So yeah, having that stiff rib cage and pelvis should come in really handy. And that's the fun part of doing monsters and creatures and chimeras and, you know, mythological creatures is, you know, understanding, studying all the physiologies of these different animals. You learn a lot being a creature designer, and you come up with a lot of original ideas for how a creature might move or talk or communicate, or, you know, you come up with different character ideas for the animal based on its physiology. So I'll make sure it's not sticking.